What happens when a celebrated black chef and his family face shocking discrimination at an upscale restaurant, only to reveal that he secretly owns the entire place? Watch how an elegant family dinner transforms into a powerful moment of justice that changes the restaurant industry forever. Will armed security and prejudiced staff face consequences? How does a father protect his children while fighting systemic racism? Don't miss this powerful story of triumph, family strength, and long overdue change. Every like and subscribe helps us bring more inspiring stories of justice and transformation to light. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support makes these stories possible. The silver Tesla Model X glided to a stop in front of Le Petit Jardin, Manhattan's newest 3 Michelin-starred sensation. Marcus Reynolds adjusted his Tom Ford jacket in the rearview mirror, a subtle smile playing across his face. Tonight's dinner wasn't just another meal at an exclusive restaurant, it was his celebration. After 15 years of grinding through kitchens, earning his James Beard Medal, and finally making enough Food Network appearances to become a household name, he had secretly become the owner of this temple to French gastronomy. "Dad, there's paparazzi," Kevin said from the back seat, his 14-year-old face reflecting both excitement and concern. At 6 feet tall, he already matched his father's height, though his basketball player's frame was leaner than Marcus's chef's build. "They're not here for us, baby," Diana Reynolds replied, smoothing her son's collar. Her Valentino dress caught the setting sun, but her eyes, sharp from years of civil rights litigation, were already scanning the environment. "Yet," she added under her breath. 9-year-old Sarah pressed her face against the window, her dark curls bouncing with excitement. "Look at all the fancy people. They don't know you own it, right, Daddy?" Marcus winked at his daughter through the mirror. "That's our little secret, princess. Remember what we talked about? Act surprised when they bring out the special dessert," Sarah recited, then added proudly, "like when you were on Iron Chef." The valet approached, his practiced smile faltering for just a fraction of a second as Marcus stepped out. Diana noticed, she always noticed, but kept her lawyer's poker face intact. Tonight was about celebration, not confrontation. Inside, the host's eyes flicked between Marcus's face and her reservation list 3 times before recognition dawned. "Oh. Chef Reynolds. We weren't expecting, Reynolds, party of 4, Diana interrupted smoothly. "We have an 8 o'clock reservation." The host's fingers trembled slightly on her iPad. Of course. Though, our window tables are all reserved for." "The corner table will be fine," Marcus said quietly, his hand finding the small of Diana's back. After 20 years of marriage, they had perfected this dance. His calm to her fire, her steel to his patience. As they wound through the dining room, conversations dimmed. Forks paused midway to mouths. A wine glass stopped tilting. Kevin walked taller, shoulders back, channeling the confidence his father had taught him. Sarah gripped Diana's hand tighter, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Their corner table offered a stunning view of the kitchen doors. Diana's eyebrow arched slightly, but Marcus squeezed her hand under the table. This was exactly where he wanted to be. "The sommelier will be right with you," their waiter said, his accent wavering between French and Flatbush. His eyes kept darting to Marcus, then away, then back again. "Thank you, Antoine," Marcus replied, using the young man's name smoothly. The waiter started, then broke into a genuine smile. In the kitchen hierarchy, knowing names meant everything. Sarah was already lost in the children's menu, but Kevin watched the dining room with his father's quiet observation. "They're all staring," he whispered. "Let them," Diana said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. "They're about to witness excellence." Marcus unfolded his napkin with the precision of a chef plating a delicate dish. "Tonight isn't about them, family. Tonight is about us. About dreams coming true." He paused as the sommelier approached, recognition lighting up the man's face. "About celebrating how far we've come. And how far we have to go," Diana added softly, her hand finding his again under the table. The sommelier arrived with a bottle Marcus had personally selected weeks ago. Around them, phones began to emerge, not-so-subtle photos being taken. A social media storm was brewing, #Chef Reynolds at Le Petit Jardin, but they didn't know the half of it yet. Sarah looked up from her menu, her young face serious. "Daddy, when they find out you own this place, will they still look at us funny?" Marcus met his daughter's eyes, then glanced at his son, his wife, and finally around the dining room that was now his. "Baby girl, they can look all they want. We're not going anywhere." Diana raised her water glass in a subtle toast. "To owning our place at the table." "All of them," Marcus added with a smile that held 15 years of kitchen battle scars and tonight's secret triumph. They clinked glasses, this beautiful black family in their corner table, unaware that their celebration was about to become something entirely different. The real story was about to begin. Antoine returned to their table, his earlier smile now strained. "I apologize, but the manager would like to verify your method of payment before we proceed with the order." His eyes wouldn't meet Marcus's. "It's a new policy for certain reservations." Diana's hand tightened on her water glass, but her voice remained courtroom calm. "Certain reservations?" Before Marcus could respond, a woman in a tailored black suit approached their table. Her blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a metronome counting down to confrontation. "Good evening, I'm Victoria Whitmore, General Manager." Her smile was professional, practiced, parasitic. "We've had some recent issues with reservations and payment verification. I'm sure you understand." Marcus reached for his wallet, but Diana's hand stopped him. "Actually, we don't understand. Are you asking all your guests to verify payment before ordering?" Her eyes swept the dining room, noting the other tables enjoying their first courses, undisturbed. 2 tables over, a woman in pearls whispered to her companion, phone discreetly angled toward the Reynolds family. At the bar, a young influencer type was more blatant with her recording, probably already live-streaming what she thought would be another viral Karen moment. Kevin sat straighter, his teenage frame taut with awareness. He'd seen this before, at malls, in stores, even at his private school parent meetings. Sarah, picking up on the tension, pressed closer to her mother. "Mom," she whispered, "why are they being mean?" "Not mean, baby," Diana answered, loud enough to carry. "Just predictable." Victoria's smile tightened. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately? Perhaps we could order our dinner?" Marcus countered, his voice carrying the same authority he used in professional kitchens. "The Wagyu is best served promptly after preparation, as your chef knows." The manager's eyes narrowed at his casual display of culinary knowledge. "Sir, if you could just, black card or Centurion?" Diana interrupted, producing both from her purse. "Or would you prefer to see our combined income statement? My law firm's equity partnership details? My husband's James Beard Award bank deposits?" Sarah tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, isn't that your picture on the wall?" All eyes turned to the restaurant's wall of fame. Among the framed photos of celebrity chefs and food critics, Marcus Reynolds smiled down at them, captured mid-demonstration at a charity event held in this very restaurant 3 months ago. Victoria's face flushed. Antoine, still hovering nearby, suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. At the bar, the influencer's eyes widened as she zoomed in on the photo, probably fact-checking in real time. "I see this establishment still displays my client's image," Diana continued, shifting fully into lawyer mode. "Interesting, given your apparent concerns about our legitimacy." Marcus placed a gentle hand on his wife's arm. "Diana." "No, Marcus. They need to understand exactly who they're dealing with." She turned back to Victoria. "Would you like to rethink your approach, or should I begin documenting this interaction for the discrimination suit I'm already composing in my head?" A murmur rippled through the nearby tables. Phones disappeared as quickly as they'd emerged, their owners suddenly conscious of being potential witnesses rather than social media vultures. Kevin leaned forward, his voice low. "Dad, we don't have to stay. We can celebrate somewhere else." Marcus studied his son's face, too young to see this familiar dance, too old not to understand it. "No, son. We're exactly where we should be." Victoria's professional mask cracked slightly. "I apologize if there's been a misunderstanding. Of course, we'd be happy to serve you. Antoine, please take their order." "Actually," Marcus said, rising slowly to his full height, "I'd prefer to discuss this with Jean-Claude." He smiled, naming the executive chef who technically still ran the kitchen. "We've worked together before." Victoria's face went from flushed to pale. "Chef Dubois is very busy in the kitchen. Oh, I know exactly how busy he is." Marcus's smile remained pleasant. "Just like I know the Wagyu is aged for exactly 37 days, not the 40 listed on your menu. And that your sommelier has been holding that 82 Lafite in the cellar for 3 months longer than recommended. The manager's eyes widened as Marcus casually revealed insider knowledge. Diana watched with the same pride she felt when winning a particularly satisfying case. Sarah, still not fully grasping the situation but sensing her father's triumph, beamed. Daddy knows everything about this place. More than they realize, Princess, Marcus replied, then turned back to Victoria. Now, about that order. The manager retreated, heels clicking a hasty retreat. Antoine stepped forward, his earlier nervousness replaced with dawning realization. Shall I tell Chef Dubois you're here, sir? The last word carried a weight of understanding. Marcus glanced at his family, Diana's satisfied smile, Kevin's growing pride, Sarah's innocent joy, and made a decision. The reveal could wait. Tonight had already shown him something more important. His children needed to see not just his success, but how he handled the road to it. No need, Antoine. Just the orders for now. After all, he smiled, meeting Diana's knowing look, the night is still young. The first course arrived with perfect timing but imperfect intent. Victoria had stationed herself near the kitchen door, speaking urgently into her earpiece while glancing repeatedly at their table. 2 security guards in subtle black suits had materialized near the bar, their earpieces matching the manager's. Your butter-poached lobster, madam, Antoine announced, placing Diana's plate with practiced grace. His hands trembled slightly as he served Marcus's foie gras. Chef Dubois sends his specific regards. Marcus caught the hesitation. His specific regards? He said, and I quote, tell the Food Network celebrity he's welcome to critique my kitchen when he runs his own. Antoine's eyes darted to Victoria, then back. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't want to, it's fine, Marcus cut in smoothly. Tell Jean-Claude his foie needs 30 more seconds on the sear. He knows I'm right. Kevin, picking at his Wagyu tartare, suddenly straightened. Dad, those guys are coming over. The security guards approached with the practiced casualness of men used to intimidating others politely. The taller one, whose name tag read Thompson, positioned himself at the end of their table while his partner hung back, hand resting near his radio. Good evening, sir, Thompson began, his voice pitched low but carrying. We've had some concerns raised about what? Diana interrupted, her fork placed precisely beside her untouched lobster. About a black family dining in your establishment? Or about my husband knowing more about this kitchen than your staff would like? Sarah's small voice cut through the tension. Mommy, why do they have guns? The question hung in the air like smoke. Several nearby diners audibly gasped. The influencer at the bar, who had never stopped recording, zoomed in on the guard's subtle shoulder holsters. Armed security in a dining room, Diana said, her phone now openly recording. Interesting choice for a Michelin-starred restaurant. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, we're certified to harass paying customers? Marcus asked quietly. To frighten children? Victoria rushed over, her heels no longer clicking with authority, but squeaking with panic. This is simply a standard security check, nothing standard about it, Kevin said suddenly, his teenage voice cracking with emotion. We're just eating dinner. Like everyone else. The second security guard stepped forward. Sir, we're going to need to see some additional identification and your method of payment. Marcus reached slowly into his jacket, hyper-aware of the armed men standing over his family. He withdrew not his wallet, but a small leather folder. Here's my identification. He flipped it open, revealing not just his driver's license, but a series of business cards. Restaurant critic credentials. Food Network contracts. And finally, a fresh business card that read, Marcus Reynolds, owner and executive chef, Le Petit Jardin Restaurant Group. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the kitchen's distant clatter seemed to pause. As of 3 weeks ago, Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the now silent dining room, I acquired controlling interest in this restaurant. Along with 4 others in the group. He turned to Victoria, whose face had gone from pink to ash. Something your corporate office was planning to announce next week. The influencer at the bar dropped her phone. The clatter echoed like a gavel. Daddy! Sarah exclaimed, does this mean you own all the fancy tables? Diana allowed herself a small smile. Yes, baby. Every single one. Thompson's hand had dropped from his holster, his face a mask of confusion. "Sir, we weren't informed." "Clearly," Diana cut in, "there are a lot of things you weren't informed about, including federal laws regarding public accommodation and discrimination." She stood, her lawyer's presence filling the space. "Would you like me to enumerate them? I have several relevant cases on my phone, including ones I've won." Victoria stepped forward, her professional mask cracking completely. "Mr. Reynolds, if we had known, that's exactly the problem," Marcus interrupted, his voice still quiet but now carrying the weight of every kitchen he'd ever commanded. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat my family with respect. My son shouldn't have to watch armed men approach his dinner table. My daughter shouldn't have to ask why security guards are carrying weapons while she eats her pasta." Kevin, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. "The other customers don't look scared anymore, Dad. They look scared for us." He was right. The dining room's atmosphere had shifted. Phones were no longer recording in mockery, but in witness. The young black hostess near the front was wiping tears. An elderly white couple at the next table had half risen, as if to intervene. "Mr. Reynolds," Thompson tried again, "we deeply apologize." "Save it," Diana cut in. "Your apologies will look better in the deposition." Just then, the kitchen doors burst open. Jean-Claude Dubois, still in his chef's whites, rushed out. His face was flushed from the kitchen heat and something close to panic. "Marcus! Mon ami! Why didn't you tell me you were?" He stopped short, taking in the scene: armed guards, crying hostess, standing customers, Marcus's open credentials. "Hello, Jean-Claude," Marcus said calmly. "We need to talk about your foie gras. And your security protocols. And possibly your employment contract." The executive chef blanched. "Mon Dieu." Sarah tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, does this mean you can make them take their guns away?" Marcus looked at his daughter, then his son, seeing the cost of this evening in their eyes. He turned to his wife, reading 20 years of shared battles in her expression. Finally, he faced the room, his room now, though this wasn't how he'd planned to claim it. "Yes, princess," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's exactly what it means. And a lot more." Diana's phone was still recording as she spoke into it clearly. "Let the record show that on this date, at this Michelin-starred establishment, armed security was deployed against a family of paying customers, including minors, with no provocation except." She paused for effect, her courtroom timing perfect. "Well, I'm sure social media can fill in that blank." The influencer at the bar called out, already trending, "Mrs. Reynolds. Hashtag Black Excellence and hashtag Dining While Black are picking it up nationwide." Victoria looked like she might faint. Jean-Claude was rapidly crossing himself. Thompson and his partner were backing away, hands carefully visible. Marcus stood, buttoning his jacket with the same precision he used to plate dishes. "I think it's time for the main course," he announced to the silent room. "And some significant changes to the menu." Kevin smiled for the first time that evening. "Does this mean we get to eat at the window table next time?" "Son," Marcus replied, his voice carrying to every corner of his restaurant, "we can eat at any table we want. But first, we're going to make sure everyone else can too." The kitchen doors swung silently in the background, waiting for their new owner's first command. 2 NYPD officers entered Le Petit Jardin exactly 4 minutes after Victoria made a discreet call. They moved through the dining room with practiced efficiency, their body cameras blinking red. Marcus noticed they were both white, both young, and both carrying the stiff posture of men who had already decided what kind of situation they were walking into. "Good evening," the taller officer said, his nameplate reading Sullivan. "We received a call about a disturbance." Diana's phone was still recording. "The only disturbance here is armed security guards threatening a family during dinner." Her voice carried the same tone she used when addressing hostile witnesses. The second officer, Martinez, scanned the scene, the standing diners, the retreating security guards, the crying hostess, and the Reynolds family at their corner table. His hand rested casually on his belt. "Sir," Sullivan addressed Marcus, pointedly ignoring Diana, "we need to see some identification." "Of course you do," Kevin muttered, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Several phones shifted to capture his teenage defiance. Marcus reached for his credentials again, but Jean-Claude stepped forward, his French accent thickening with stress. "Officers, there has been a terrible mistake. This is Marcus Reynolds, the new owner of, step back, sir, Martinez cut in. Sir, he turned to Marcus, hands where we can see them. Sarah's pasta fork clattered to her plate. Daddy? The sound of his daughter's fear crystallized something in Marcus. He stood slowly, deliberately, his chef's posture perfect. Officers, I'm reaching for my identification, which I've already shown to the security team. I'm the owner of this establishment, and I'd appreciate, just the ID, sir, Sullivan interrupted, taking a step closer. Diana stood too, her phone steady. Officer Sullivan, I'm Diana Reynolds, civil rights attorney. Your body cameras are on, correct? Because mine certainly is. The dining room had become a theater of silent witnesses. The influencer's livestream counter ticked past 10,000 viewers. An elderly white woman at the next table had her own phone out, openly recording the police. It's just like the school fundraiser, Kevin said quietly to his sister. Remember? When they thought Dad was the caterer instead of the biggest donor? Sarah nodded, her small hand finding her brother's under the table. But Daddy fixed it then. He shouldn't have to fix anything, Kevin replied, his voice carrying the weight of lessons learned too young. Marcus produced his ID and ownership papers with the same smooth motion he used to plate delicate dishes. Everything you need to verify is right here, officers. Sullivan studied the documents, while Martinez kept his attention on Marcus. The officer's eyes widened slightly as he read. You actually own this place? Yes, Marcus replied evenly. Along with several others in the restaurant group. Would you like to see the purchase agreements? Diana's lawyer's timing was perfect. Or perhaps you'd like to explain why you responded to a call about a black family dining in their own restaurant? Martinez shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, we're just responding to a call about a disturbance that suspiciously coincided with my husband revealing his ownership? Diana's voice could have frozen a flambe. Interesting timing. The influencer's voice carried from the bar. Comments are asking why the police were called on the actual owner. It's trending now. Major food critics are picking it up. Jean-Claude made a small choking sound. Victoria, still hovering nearby, looked like she might need the restaurant's fainting couch, if they'd had one. Officers, Marcus said quietly, I respect your position. But right now, you're frightening my children in my restaurant during what was supposed to be a family celebration. Sullivan glanced at Kevin's rigid posture, at Sarah's wide eyes. Something in his expression shifted. Mr. Reynolds, we apologize for the interruption. He handed back the documents. Clearly there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Diana corrected. Just documentation. For the lawsuit. Martinez started to speak, but a new voice cut through the tension. What the hell is going on here? A tall black man in an impeccable suit stood in the restaurant's entrance. Marcus recognized him immediately, James Carter, the NYPD's Deputy Commissioner for Public Information. And, though few knew it, a regular at Marcus's other restaurants. James, Marcus called out. Interesting evening. Carter surveyed the scene with practiced eyes, body cameras, phones recording, armed security trying to blend into the wallpaper, his officers standing over a prominent black family. Officers, Carter's voice carried command. I believe Mr. Reynolds has shown his ID. Is there any other reason for police presence in this establishment? Sullivan and Martinez exchanged glances. No, sir. We were just leaving, Carter finished. I'll handle this. He turned to Marcus. Chef, I believe I'm overdue for your new tasting menu. Mind if I join you? The shift in the room was palpable. Victoria looked ready to faint. The security guards had completely disappeared. Jean-Claude was stress-eating bread rolls at the service station. As the officers retreated, Sarah's small voice piped up. Mommy, did we win? Diana's phone was still recording. No, baby. But we documented. And that's how we start winning. Carter pulled up a chair, smoothly inserting himself into their family circle. Kevin, last time I saw you, you were asking about the Police Athletic League's basketball program. Still interested? Kevin sat straighter. Yes, sir. But. He glanced at the retreating officers. I have some questions about that now. Good, Carter nodded. Questions are how we make changes. Speaking of changes, he turned to Marcus. I hear congratulations are in order. Though this wasn't quite the ownership announcement you planned? Marcus looked at his family, Diana's protective stance, Kevin's emerging awareness, Sarah's resilient spirit, and then around his restaurant, where phones were finally lowering but awareness had been permanently raised. Maybe it's exactly what was needed, he said. Sometimes the best dishes aren't the ones on the menu. Then let's make sure everyone gets a taste of justice for dessert, Diana added, finally putting down her phone. With a side of accountability. Carter smiled grimly. I believe that's already being served. Social media moves faster than seasoned politicians. Sarah, ever the optimist, brightened. Can we have real dessert too? Marcus laughed for the first time that evening. Yes, princess. In fact, he looked at Jean-Claude, who straightened immediately. I think it's time to show everyone exactly what changes are coming to the menu. The kitchen doors swung open, ready for their new owner's first command. The night wasn't over yet, but the flavor had definitely changed. The restaurant's elegant lighting couldn't compete with the harsh glow of phone screens throughout the dining room. While Deputy Commissioner Carter shared dessert with the Reynolds family, the internet exploded. Dad, you're trending #1, Kevin said, scrolling through his phone. Hashtag Chef Reynolds owns it and hashtag Dining While Black are everywhere. Oh, Gordon Ramsay just retweeted the video. The influencer who'd captured everything, now identified as food blogger Maya Chen, 2.3 million followers, had moved closer to their table. Chef Reynolds, your industry colleagues are responding en masse. Marcus Samuelson just posted a 5-tweet thread about his similar experiences. Carla Hall is calling for a boycott of restaurants with armed security. Diana's phone buzzed continuously. CNN wants a statement. MSNBC, too. The New York Times food critic is calling it a watershed moment for fine dining equality. She paused, a rare smile crossing her face. And my firm's managing partners are unanimously backing a class action. Sarah, finishing her chocolate soufflé, made to perfection on Jean-Claude's third try, looked up. What's a class action, Mommy? It means, Carter answered, dabbing his mouth with a napkin, that your parents are about to change more than just this restaurant's menu. Marcus watched as Jean-Claude frantically worked his phone in the corner. The executive chef's face shifted between panic and resignation as he scrolled through the industry's response. Victoria had disappeared entirely, but her absence was filled by a new presence, Alessandra Romano, CEO of the restaurant group, who had just rushed in from an opera at the Met, still in her evening gown. Marcus, she said, approaching their table with genuine concern, I just saw everything. The announcement was supposed to be perfect next week. A celebration of diversity in fine dining. Instead, she gestured helplessly at the phones, the lingering police presence outside, the watching eyes. Instead, Marcus replied calmly, we showed exactly why that celebration was needed. Maya Chen's phone chirped loudly. The James Beard Foundation just released a statement. They're launching an industry-wide investigation into discriminatory security practices at high-end restaurants. Kevin looked up from his phone. Dad, your old clips from Food Network are going viral too. The ones where you talked about breaking barriers in French cuisine. The barriers aren't just in the kitchen anymore, son, Marcus said, meeting Carter's knowing gaze. They're at every table. Diana's phone buzzed again. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund wants to coordinate. She paused, reading further. And 3 other Black restaurant owners have already come forward with similar experiences. Sarah tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, are you still going to cook here? The question cut through the digital chaos. Marcus looked at his daughter, then around at his restaurant, his dream turned battlefield, turned platform for change. Yes, princess. But we're going to change some recipes. Starting with how we treat every guest who walks through that door. Alessandra nodded firmly. The entire security team is already dismissed. Victoria has tendered her resignation. And Jean-Claude. The executive chef approached their table, his usual confidence replaced with genuine remorse. Marcus. I never knew. In all our collaborations, I never saw. That's the point, isn't it? Marcus replied. You never had to see it. But now everyone does. Maya's phone lit up again. The video just hit 5 million views. Celebrity chef Jose Andres is calling for an industry summit on racial bias in fine dining. Diana set her phone down deliberately. Change happens when we make it impossible to look away. She turned to Carter. Your officer's body camera footage will be instrumental. Already preserved, Carter assured her. And Internal Affairs is very interested in why Armed Response was dispatched to a dinner reservation. Kevin, still monitoring social media, suddenly straightened. Dad, people are making reservations at all your restaurants as a show of support. They're all booked solid for the next month. Good, Marcus said, standing to address his staff, who had gathered nervously at the edges of the dining room. Because we're about to show them what inclusive fine dining really looks like. The kitchen doors swung one last time that evening, but now they opened on a new era. Phones captured the moment Marcus Reynolds walked into his kitchen, his family behind him, his industry watching, and his mission clear. Sarah's voice carried across the suddenly quiet restaurant. Daddy, does this mean we can eat at any table next time? Marcus turned back, his smile both gentle and determined. No, baby. This means everyone can. And across the internet, millions joined in witnessing the first course of change being served. Long after the last customer had left Le Petit Jardin, the Reynolds family sat in their Tesla, processing the evening. The city lights reflected off the car's dark windows, providing a momentary shield from the world's watching eyes. I keep seeing their faces, Kevin said quietly, breaking the silence. The security guards, the police, they looked at us the same way the refs look at me during basketball games. Like they're just waiting for me to do something wrong. Marcus turned in his seat to face his son. In the dim light, Kevin looked older than his 14 years, the weight of understanding heavy on his young shoulders. The way they look at us doesn't define who we are, Marcus said, though the words felt worn with repetition. How many times had his own father told him the same thing? But it changes how we have to live, Kevin countered, his voice cracking slightly. I saw how you reached for your ID, Dad. Slow, careful, like we practiced. Even though you own the place. Diana reached back to squeeze her son's knee. That's survival, baby. And tonight, we did more than survive. We changed the narrative. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, looked up from her tablet. My friend Emma texted. She saw us on TikTok. She's asking if we're okay. Her small face scrunched in confusion. Why wouldn't we be okay? We were just having dinner. The innocence in her question made Diana's breath catch. She exchanged a look with Marcus, both recognizing another piece of their daughter's childhood falling away. Sometimes, Princess, Marcus began carefully, people's wrong ideas can make simple things complicated. Like dinner at a nice restaurant. Or shopping at the mall, Kevin added. Or driving through certain neighborhoods, Diana continued. Or buying our dream restaurant, Marcus finished. Sarah processed this, her 9-year-old mind wrestling with adult realities. But you fixed it, Daddy. You showed them the papers, and Deputy Carter came, and now everyone knows you're the boss. Baby girl, Diana turned fully in her seat, your father shouldn't have had to prove anything. Neither should you, ever. That's why we fight these battles. Kevin pulled out his phone again, scrolling through the endless comments. My team's been texting. Coach says I should be proud of how we handled it. He paused, then added softly, some of them are surprised, though. Like they didn't know this stuff still happens. Now they know, Marcus said firmly. Sometimes that's how change starts. One dinner, one video, one revelation at a time. Diana's phone buzzed with another media request. She silenced it without looking. Baby, are you ready for what comes next? This story isn't going away. School tomorrow won't be just another day. Kevin sat straighter, channeling his father's quiet strength. I'm ready. Someone has to be first, right? Like Dad in those French kitchens. Sarah leaned against her brother. Will people stare at us more now? They've always stared, sunshine, Marcus replied gently. But now they'll have to see us. Really see us. Not just what they assume about us. Diana reached for Marcus's hand, their wedding rings clinking softly. Our children saw more than they should have tonight. They saw us stand our ground, Marcus countered. They saw their mother's strength, their father's dignity. They saw that their name means something. Reynolds means excellent food, Sarah declared with sudden certainty, making them all laugh. And justice for dessert, Kevin added, mimicking his mother's earlier words. Marcus started the car, its electric engine humming to life. You know what else Reynolds means? He caught his children's eyes in the rearview mirror. It means we come back tomorrow. Stronger. Better. Ready to serve everyone who walks through those doors. Even the ones who didn't want to serve us? Sarah asked. Especially them, Diana answered. That's how real change happens. One plate at a time, one table at a time, one mind at a time. As they pulled away from the restaurant, their restaurant, Kevin spoke again. Dad? Can I help in the kitchen tomorrow? I want to learn everything, like you did. So when it's my turn? Marcus felt his eyes burn. When it's your turn, son, you'll find the door already open. That's what tonight was really about. Sarah yawned, the evening's emotions finally catching up with her. Can we sit at the window table tomorrow? Baby, Diana smiled, we can sit anywhere we want. And so can everyone else. As they drove through the Manhattan night, their phones continued to buzz with support, outrage, and calls for change. But inside their Tesla bubble, the Reynolds family had found their equilibrium again. One thing's for sure, Kevin mused, watching the city lights blur past. Nobody's going to mistake Dad for the help anymore. No, Marcus agreed, thinking of the changes already in motion. Now they'll have to see all of us for who we really are. Diana squeezed his hand. A family of excellence. With really good food, Sarah added sleepily. They drove home together, their bond strengthened by fire, their purpose clearer than ever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cameras, new questions. But tonight had proven what they'd always known, the Reynolds family could handle whatever was served to them. And they'd do it with style, strength, and a perfectly plated side of justice. The next morning, Le Petit Jardin's private dining room had been transformed into a war room. Diana sat at the head of the table, surrounded by partners from her law firm, while Marcus stood by the window, watching protesters gather outside, not against him, but in support. The security company's license is already under review, Diana's managing partner, Richard Chen, reported. Apparently, they've had similar incidents at other high-end establishments. They just picked the wrong restaurant this time. Wrong family, Diana corrected, spreading out documents across the mahogany table. We've already received statements from 15 other black diners who experienced similar treatment here. Plus 30 more from other exclusive restaurants in the city. Marcus turned from the window as Alessandra Romano entered, tablet in hand. The restaurant group's board is meeting in an hour. They're prepared to implement immediate changes across all properties. She paused, checking her screen. And Victoria's resignation has been amended to a termination. Good, Marcus said quietly. And Jean-Claude? Still in the kitchen, Alessandra replied. He's been stress cooking since dawn. Says he wants to stay, to learn, to do better. The food was never the problem, Marcus mused. It was always about who was allowed to eat it. Diana's phone buzzed with another update. The NYPD commissioner is holding a press conference at noon. Carter says they're announcing new protocols for responding to restaurant-related calls. And those 2 officers? Mandatory retraining. Not enough, Richard interjected. We're pushing for department-wide policy changes. No more armed response to dining disputes. Through the door, they could hear the regular lunch service beginning. Marcus had insisted on staying open. Change doesn't happen behind closed doors, he'd told his staff that morning. Kevin had asked to shadow the hostess team today, wanting to see firsthand how guests were welcomed. Sarah was safely at school, though her teacher had called to say they were discussing current events in class. Michelin Guide just released their statement, Alessandra read from her tablet. We are reviewing our criteria to include diversity and inclusion metrics in our rating system. That's a first. They're not the only ones scrambling, Richard added. 3 other restaurant groups have reached out, wanting to get ahead of similar incidents. They're requesting diversity training, policy reviews, and covering their assets, Diana finished dryly. Speaking of which, the security company's insurance provider called. They're eager to discuss settlement options. Marcus shook his head. This was never about money. No, Diana agreed, but money makes them pay attention. And what we do with it. She slid a draft proposal across the table. The Reynolds Foundation for Culinary Equity. Scholarships, apprenticeships, and legal support for marginalized communities in the food industry. Marcus picked up the proposal, his chef's hand steady. From public housing to fine dining. Like my journey, but with fewer locked doors. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see more protesters arriving, their signs demanding change in the restaurant industry. Local news crews were setting up, and a line of prospective diners stretched around the block. "They're here to support you," Alessandra said softly. "They're here because they're hungry for change," Marcus corrected. "And we're finally serving it." Diana's phone buzzed again. "The James Beard Foundation wants you to chair their new diversity initiative. And Food Network is proposing a special on Black-owned fine dining establishments." "Starting with this one," Marcus said, then paused as Jean-Claude appeared in the doorway, his chef's whites impeccable but his expression haunted. "Marcus," he began, his accent thicker with emotion, "the new menu. I thought perhaps we could add some dishes to reflect our commitment to change." Marcus studied his former mentor, seeing the genuine desire to make amends. "The food was always inclusive, Jean-Claude. It was the tables that weren't." Alessandra's tablet chimed with breaking news. "The mayor's office is launching an investigation into discriminatory practices in high-end dining establishments. They're citing last night as a catalyst." "Good," Diana said firmly. "Let them all examine their practices while we change them." Richard gathered his papers. "The class action complaint is ready. It's more than just this incident now. It's about systemic change in the entire industry. And beyond," Diana added. "Every locked door, every suspicious glance, every armed response to a family just trying to exist in spaces they've earned." Marcus walked to the kitchen door, where he could see Kevin greeting guests with his father's quiet dignity. The lunch crowd was diverse, purposefully so. Word had spread, Le Petit Jardin was serving something more important than food today. "The check always comes due," Marcus said, watching his son, thinking of his daughter, remembering his own father's struggles. "Some just take longer to present than others." Diana joined him at the door. "And some require a bigger table to settle up." Through the window, the protesters' signs caught the midday sun: "Fine dining for all, Black excellence deserves a seat, no armed guards at dinner." Marcus straightened his chef's jacket. "Well then, let's set that table." The kitchen doors swung open on a new era, where the price of change would finally be paid in full. 1 month later, Le Petit Jardin's dining room hummed with a different energy. The window tables, once reserved for an exclusive clientele, now hosted a vibrant cross-section of New York society. At one, a young Black couple celebrated their engagement. At another, an Asian family shared a tasting menu. Near the kitchen, a group of Latino tech entrepreneurs closed a deal over wine. Marcus stood in his kitchen doorway, watching his son lead a tour for aspiring culinary students from Harlem's Food Justice Program, his first initiative through the Reynolds Foundation. "And this," Kevin announced with pride, "is where my dad makes sure everyone gets a seat at the table." Sarah sat at the chef's table, helping Diana review applications for their scholarship program while doing her homework. "Mommy, this one wants to be a chef, because his grandmother never got the chance. Can we help him?" Diana smiled, adding the application to their growing yes pile. "That's exactly why we're here, baby." The changes had rippled far beyond their restaurant's walls. The city's new dining guidelines, dubbed the Reynolds Rules by the press, banned armed security in restaurants and required equity training for staff. 3 major restaurant groups had already adopted them voluntarily, ahead of legislation. Jean-Claude, who'd chosen to stay as Marcus's partner rather than executive chef, approached with a new dessert creation. For the Justice menu, he explained, presenting an elegant chocolate sphere. When warm caramel hits it, the shell melts away to reveal. "Breaking barriers?" Marcus suggested, watching the demonstration. "Precisely," Jean-Claude smiled. "We call it Sweet Victory." The front door chimed as Deputy Commissioner Carter entered with his family. No reservation needed. Marcus's new policy guaranteed tables for those historically denied them. Behind them came Maya Chen, the influencer whose videos had helped spark change, now filming a documentary on restaurant industry reform. "Your table is ready," Kevin said professionally, then broke into a grin. "The usual spot?" Carter nodded. "Where we can see everything. And everyone can see us." Diana joined Marcus at the kitchen door, sliding her arm through his. "The settlement papers came through today. The security company agreed to all terms, including funding 3 years of scholarships," Marcus added, watching another diverse group of diners enter. "Change comes with a price tag." "Worth every penny," Diana replied. "Speaking of which, have you seen the reservation list? We're booked solid for 6 months." People aren't just coming for the food anymore. They're coming for the revolution, Sarah piped up from her homework, making everyone laugh. A delicious one, Marcus agreed, then turned as Jean-Claude called from the kitchen. Chef. The James Beard Committee is here. They want to discuss the new diversity criteria. Marcus squeezed Diana's hand. Duty calls. Go change the world, she smiled. One plate at a time. As Marcus headed to the kitchen, he passed the wall where his photo once hung alone. Now it was joined by images of other chefs of color, past and present, their stories part of the restaurant's new heritage tour. Below them sat the framed headlines from that fateful night, and beside those, a simple quote, every table. Every plate. Every person. The kitchen door swung open, and Marcus Reynolds stepped through them, into a future where fine dining finally lived up to its name, fine, refined, and finally, fair. In the dining room, Sarah's voice rang out clear and confident, Daddy, can we serve justice for dessert again? Marcus smiled. They already were. And this time everyone was invited to the table. 6 months later, Kevin stood in Le Petit Jardin's kitchen, carefully plating his first original dish for the restaurant's new next-generation menu. His father watched proudly as the 14-year-old garnished the plate with the same precision that had earned Marcus his first Michelin star. What do you call it? Marcus asked, studying his son's creation. Open doors, Kevin replied, adjusting a microgreen with tweezers. Because that's what you and Mom did for all of us. Through the kitchen window, they could see Diana giving a speech to the first graduating class of the Reynolds Foundation's culinary program. Sarah stood beside her mother, handing out certificates to the diverse group of aspiring chefs, each one representing a barrier broken. The restaurant industry had changed. The Reynolds rules had gone national, adopted by every major dining group in the country. Armed security in restaurants was now banned in 12 states. The Michelin Guide had added inclusivity metrics to its rating criteria, and 3 Black-owned restaurants had earned their first stars this year. Jean-Claude, now running their chef mentorship program, worked alongside graduates from Harlem, the Bronx, and beyond. The waiting list for the program was as long as the one for dinner reservations. But the real change was visible every night in their dining room. Every table told a story, families celebrating without fear, couples dating without judgment, success being savored without suspicion. The corner table where it all began now bore a small plaque, change starts here. Dad, Kevin said, putting the finishing touches on his plate, remember when Sarah asked if we could serve justice for dessert? Marcus nodded, watching his son work with sure hands and a confident heart. I think we did better than that, Kevin continued. We made it part of the main course. Outside, Diana concluded her speech to thunderous applause. Sarah beamed as she handed out the last certificate, her voice carrying through the kitchen window. Welcome to the family table. Marcus put his arm around his son, both of them watching the next generation of chefs celebrate their moment. The kitchen door swung gently in the background, open to all who dared to dream of a place at the table. You're right, son, Marcus said softly. Justice isn't just for dessert anymore. It's in every course we serve. And in kitchens and dining rooms across America, the menu was finally changing.